Welcome to the Orion and Patience show.
Hey, everyone.
Today we're talking about angels. You know, beings that just fascinate people, right? Warriors, guardians, sometimes even babies with wings.
Yeah, they pop up everywhere in art and stories. But the big questions are, what are they, biblically speaking?
Exactly. And we've got listener questions, especially about, well, do they look like we imagine? And what's this whole story about angels and giants? The Nephilim.
Ah, the Nephilim. Always a big topic.
So for this deep dive, we're looking at the work of Stan Mackey, specifically exploring angelic nature and the Nephilim myth.
Right. The goal is to kind of sift through the common ideas, the muscle guys, the beautiful women, the cherubs, and see what the material Stan presents actually suggests.
Let's jump in. It's a topic that really makes you think about the space between, well, us and God.
For sure. So where does this exploration start us off? What's the first piece?
Okay, so Stan points us first to the Psalms, chapter 8, verses 4 and 5.
Okay.
It mentions humans being made a little less than the heavenly beings.
Little less. Okay, so what's the takeaway from that, according to Stan?
Well, the initial thought presented is, if we're less, does that imply they're bigger, stronger, something more than us?
That's interesting. Sort of setting up a comparison right from the start. Though less could mean a lot of things, I suppose.
True. It could be status, maybe power, not just physical size. But it gets us thinking about their nature compared to ours.
Definitely. A starting point. What comes next?
Transformation. This is a big one. He uses Genesis 18.
Ah, Abraham's visitors.
Exactly. 3 men show up. Stan identifies one as God, specifically Jesus, and the other 2 as angels. But they just look like men, travelers.
Right, so they can appear in a physical, human-like form. They're not just like invisible spirits all the time.
Seems so. They interact, eat, talk. It shows they can engage directly in our world, changing how they appear.
That ability to shift form is, well, it's pretty central to a lot of angel stories, isn't it?
It is. Then there's the idea of immortality. Stan draws us from Luke, chapter 20.
Okay, Luke 20. What's the connection there?
It talks about people in the resurrection being equal to angels and that they can no longer die.
I see. So if the resurrected state, being like angels, means no more death,
then angels themselves don't die. They're immortal, created for eternity, basically.
though it's mentioned their ultimate destiny isn't guaranteed, right? It depends on their choices.
Yes, that's part of the understanding presented. Like humans, their eternal path depends on whether they align with God or, well, with Satan.
Got it. So immortal by nature, but their final state is tied to allegiance. Makes sense.
Okay, next point, and this one's really crucial. Free will.
Oh, yeah. Super important.
Stan references Isaiah, the whole description of Lucifer's thoughts, his fall.
Right. I will ascend. That whole passage.
The point being, angels weren't just made as divine robots programmed to obey. They have their own will. They can choose.
And obviously some chose.
Yeah.
Poorly. Like Lucifer, Satan.
Exactly. God doesn't force their hand. That free will is fundamental.
It really is. It explains so much about the spiritual conflict we read about. It's not just God versus puppets.
Right. And tied to that, another key thing. They are not to be worshipped.
Absolutely critical distinction.
Stan points to Revelation 19, verse 10. John sees this incredible angel, probably Gabriel, it's often thought.
And he understandably just falls down to worship him.
Yep. But the angel immediately stops him. Says something like, "Don't do that. I'm a servant just like you."
Worship is for God alone, period.
That's the message Stan emphasizes. Even these amazing beings point back to God.
It sets the hierarchy straight. They're powerful, yes, but still servants.
Okay, so we're getting a picture. Strong, can transform, immortal with that choice aspect. Free will, not to be worshipped, but what do they look like? Gender.
Ah, the million-dollar question. Male, female, both. Neither. Babies.
Stan acknowledges it's confusing. He even mentions one author, Clear Stone, who believes she's communicated with female archangels. So there are different perspectives out there.
Right, and personal experiences definitely shape how people see them. Plus, centuries of art.
Totally. He touches on the androgynous look in some art and also the baby angels, the cherubs.
Like Cupid.
Yeah, like Cupid. But Stan's quick to point out Cupid isn't biblical. That's mythology mixed in.
Good clarification. It's easy for those images to get blended together.
So separating cultural images from the presented theology is key here.
Okay, so powerful, spiritual, transformable, immortal-ish, free will servants, not necessarily male, female, or baby. Now, the Nephilim.
Right. The giants. Where does this idea come from that angels were involved?
This is where it gets really interesting and controversial.
Stan takes us to Numbers 13, verse 33, the spies returning from Canaan.
The scary report. We saw giants.
Yes. They mention seeing the sons of Anak, and the text says they are Nephilim using the Hebrew word. And these guys were reportedly huge.
How huge are we talking?
The scale mentioned is kind of mind-boggling. Maybe 12 feet, maybe up to 36 feet tall.
36 feet. Wow.
Yeah. Stan notes even Goliath, who was massive himself, maybe 12, 18 feet, falls into the lower end of that range.
Okay, that puts it in perspective. These are descriptions of truly enormous beings.
And to drive it home, he also brings up Amos, chapter 2, verse 9.
What does it say?
God talking about destroying the Amorites, who are often equated with these giants. And he describes them as being as tall as cedars and as strong as oaks.
Cedars, like cedar of Lebanon trees?
Exactly. Stan explains those can be taller than a 2-story house. We're talking, 20, maybe 30 feet.
Okay, visualizing a person as tall as a cedar tree, that's definitely not your average human.
No kidding. It paints a picture of why people might look for an extraordinary explanation for their origin.
So the connection is often made to Genesis chapter 6, right? Verse 4.
That's the one. It mentions Nephilim being on the earth in those days, and also afterward, when the sons of God went to the daughters of humans and had children by them.
And the common interpretation, the one that leads to the angel theory, is that sons of God means angels. Fallen angels, usually.
Right. But this is where Stan challenges that interpretation quite directly.
Okay, so what's the counter-argument presented?
He argues that biblically, sons of God typically refers to humans.
Humans. How so?
Well, he goes back to that Luke 20 passage again. Resurrected humans are called sons of God because they'll be like the angels.
Okay, so that's one instance.
And then he points to Luke chapter 3, the genealogy of Jesus. Way back at the beginning, Adam himself is called the Son of God.
Adam is the son of God. Interesting.
So Stan's point is, contextually, within the Bible, the phrase seems to apply to humans, either righteous people, those in God's lineage like Adam, or resurrected humans, not angels.
That definitely offers a different way to read Genesis 6 if sons of God are just human men, maybe powerful or notable ones.
And the Nephilim are simply their offspring with human women, maybe mighty warriors, famous men, as the verse also says.
What about the word Nephilim itself? Does it mean offspring of angels?
Stan mentions the meaning is actually uncertain. It might mean fallen ones or be related to warriors, but it doesn't inherently mean half angel.
So the name itself isn't conclusive proof either way. Language ambiguity again.
Right. Then he brings up a timeline problem.
A timeline problem? How so?
The Nephilim are mentioned in Genesis 6 before the flood.
Okay, right. And only Noah and his family survived the flood. 8 people.
Exactly. So if the Nephilim were this specific race, half angel or whatever, they should have been wiped out. Gone.
But they're mentioned after the flood, too, like in Numbers 13 when the spies see them.
Precisely. So Stan asks, how could the same group exist after the flood if they were all destroyed? It suggests either the term Nephilim was used more broadly for any large, fierce people, or the post-flood ones had a different origin.
That's a strong logical point against them being a single, pre-flood, half-angelic race.
It does create a puzzle for that interpretation.
So if the Bible itself doesn't explicitly say sons of God are angels in Genesis 6, and there's this timeline issue, where did that idea come from so strongly?
Stan identifies the main source for that specific idea, the Book of Enoch.
Enoch. Not part of the standard Bible canon for most traditions.
Correct. He mentions chapter 19 specifically talks about angels and women, but he stresses it's an extra biblical text. Interesting historically maybe, but not scripture in the same way.
That's a crucial distinction for theological arguments. Relying on non-canonical texts can lead you down different paths.
So, bringing the Nephilim discussion to a close based on this analysis, Stan circles back to the purpose of angels.
What they were created for.
Yeah. Things like worshiping God, protecting people, being involved in human affairs, but crucially, they're spirit beings. Matthew 22 is cited where Jesus says beings in the resurrection neither marry nor are given in marriage like angels.
Meaning they weren't designed for procreation.
That's the conclusion drawn. Given their spiritual nature and purpose, procreating with humans to create Nephilim seems outside their design. Therefore, based on the biblical texts focused on, angels couldn't have fathered them.
So the sons of God in Genesis 6 are interpreted as humans, and the Nephilim are their powerful, perhaps unusually large human offspring.
That's the position presented based on this reading.
Okay, so Wrapping up the angel identity question too, male, female, babies.
Stan's conclusion is pretty clear. They're angels, a distinct category. Gender, as we know it, relates to creation for animals and humans for reproduction.
Which wasn't the angel's purpose.
Right. So applying human gender might just be missing the point of what they are.
There's something else entirely. Spiritual beings.
Exactly. So let's quickly recap this deep dive using Stan Mackey's work.
Okay. Angels, powerful spiritual beings, have free will, can transform, serve God, not to be worshipped, immortal, but destiny tied to choice.
And sons of God in the key texts presented as referring to humans.
Which means the Nephilim, while certainly formidable and maybe gigantic, aren't seen as half-angelic offspring in this interpretation.
And angels don't fit neatly into our human concepts of male or female gender. They're their own order of being.
It definitely challenges some popular imagery.
It does. Which leads us to a final thought for you, the listener.
Considering this view of angels, their distinct nature, their purpose focused on God, their spiritual existence, how might really grasping that reshape how you perceive the spiritual realm?
Yeah, and how it interacts with our world. What other ideas about angels or maybe other spiritual beings do we hold that might need a closer look based on these kinds of distinctions?
Something to think about. A different lens, perhaps.